Hypothalamus, artificial intelligence. Digital transformation powered by real-time autonomous and intelligent algorithms. Presents its solutions for decision-making, artificial intelligence, and disaster and emergency management. Part 2. Events due to humans. Framework. The challenge. Develop a DSS for disaster and emergency management. The overall objective is to minimize potential negative economic impact and human life losses. The solution. Design a set of mathematical models to address the problems arising from disaster management based on stochastic programming models. The benefit. A set of measures and mathematical models to prevent and/or reduce the impact of disasters, and it prepares the community to respond in the best way when a disaster strikes. The general approach of HI is to connect predictive and prescriptive analytics models, which implies an integrated holistic vision, multidimensional space-time, of the entire supply chain of disaster response services. Predictive analytics is based, mainly, in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and complex probabilistic methods. Prescriptive analytics in mathematical programming, better known as optimization. Activities to ensure safety. These mission areas may be grouped based on when a defensive action is intended to occur, either before, during, or after an attack. Proactive planning, mission areas whose defensive actions are taken before an attack occurs. These mission areas are prevention/protection, and mitigation. Real-time operational planning, mission areas whose required actions are taken during or immediately after an attack. These mission areas are detection and response. Recovery planning, mission areas whose required actions occur after an attack. This mission area is recovery. Sun Tzu, in the book The Art of War said, "Every battle is won before it is fought." In the war on terror, planning supported by the scientific method can avoid conflicts, so that many battles are won without a fight. For disasters caused by the humans it implies. The overall objective is to minimize the potential economic and human loss, and the social impact of the terrorist attack. To do this, models are proposed that study the opponent and hypothesize the decisions that can be made, using game theory models, on where, when and how to allocate defense resources. The state-of-the-art of scientific planning of confrontations, attackers versus defenders, is the use of competitive game concepts developed by John Nash. Security games study the convergence property to the equilibrium of a sequence two-player dynamic games, played by an attacker and a defender. The fundamental features of the game are: the evolution of the game is based on a stochastic fictitious play process. Players do not have access to each other's payoff matrix, and each must observe the other's actions up to present, and plays the action based on the best response to these observations. When the game is played over a communication network, there are another practical issues that need to be considered. Network latency. The players may make random decision errors from time to time. The players' observations of each other's previous actions may be incorrect, and the players will try to compensate for these errors based on the information they have. Adversarial risk analysis, ARA, is a relatively new area of research that informs decision-making when facing intelligent opponents and uncertain outcomes. It enables an analyst to express her Bayesian beliefs about an opponent's utilities, capabilities, probabilities, and the type of strategic calculation that the opponent is using. Within that framework, the analyst then solves the problem from the perspective of the opponent, while placing subjective probability distributions on all unknown quantities. This produces a distribution over the actions of the opponent that permits the analyst to maximize his expected utility. ARA is a decision-theoretic alternative to classical game theory, GT, that uses Bayesian subjective distributions to model the goals, resources, beliefs, and reasoning of the opponent. GT generally assumes that all participants in the game have the same beliefs about the other players, and that all players know those beliefs are known. This common knowledge assumption is frequently unrealistic. The ARA divides uncertainty into three components. Random is the uncertainty in the outcome conditioned by the choices of the opponent. This is managed through statistical risk analysis. Epistemic, a competitor does not know the opponent's utility function, nor the evaluation of the probability of outcomes, conditioned on decisions, nor even his resources, but a Bayesian competitor must be comfortable making subjective probability evaluations on each of these quantities, and conceptual, it reflects the fact that the competitor doesn't know how his opponent makes his decision. Maybe that the opponent is a game theorist, and looks for an equilibrium solution, or that randomizes, or follows some other protocol. ARA can lead to mathematical formulations whose complexity is comparable to that found in GT. There is no easy way to reason about other people's strategic thinking in realistic situations. Nonetheless, the decision-theoretic approach sidesteps some of the common criticisms of game theory. Important ARA applications are in defense, counterterrorism, corporate competition, criminal gang movements, homeland security, and cybersecurity, risk analysis. Homeland security optimization. It is a concerted effort to prevent terrorist attacks within a country or a region, to reduce vulnerability to terrorism and crime, and minimize the damage and recover from attacks that do occur. The main homeland security applications based on operation research are: the main homeland security countermeasures portfolios are border and transportation security, prevent the entry of terrorists, while ensuring efficient flow of traffic and commerce. Critical infrastructure protection, develop tools to anticipate, identify, and assess the risks in the nation's critical infrastructure. Cybersecurity, research, develop, test, and evaluate activities for improving cybersecurity. Emergency preparedness and response, plan for, prevent, respond to, and recover from natural and man-made disasters and terrorism. Threat analysis, evaluate extensive and diverse threat information. Biological, reduce the probability and consequences of a biological attack. Chemical, reduce the nation's vulnerability to chemical attacks. Radiological and nuclear, develop and deploy techniques for detection of radiological materials, and high explosives, provide the concepts, technologies, systems analysis, and procedures to interdict terrorists' use of explosives. Allocation problems. Police patrolling for subway and bus systems, other scarce resources including bomb-sniffing canines, vehicles, and security cameras, randomized baggage or people screening, allocates air marshals to flights originating in and departing from the country, allocates patrols at ports to minimize the risk of terrorism and drug trafficking, protecting forests from extractors, and cameras allocation to reduce security cost at metro and public transport. Scheduling problems. Scheduling for the Federal Air Marshal Service on commercial flights, and scheduling for police patrols and other police vehicles. And others problems. Evacuations plans, passenger classifications, and vehicle routing of dangerous materials, or people, that minimize the danger of humanity. Cybersecurity optimization. With the rising of the Internet and the technology that runs and controls it, we are transforming into a new digital age. This transformation is different than any of the previous such transformations. Advancements in the technical areas, such as natural language processing, machine, and deep learning, have tremendously improved the processing and use of social media, Internet of Things, IoTs, and cloud computing, etc. These advancements have certainly improved the workings of businesses, organizations, governments, the society, and day-to-day life of an individual. These improvements have also created some new challenges, and one of the main challenges is security. The security of the new digital age, also known as cyberspace, is called cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is the collection of tools, policies, security concepts, security safeguards, guidelines, risk management approaches, actions, training, best practices, assurance and technologies that can be used to protect the cyber environment and organization and users' assets. It aims to reduce the risk of cyber attacks and protect against the unauthorized exploitation of systems, networks, and technologies. The number and variety of cyber attacks have significantly increased. It is becoming increasingly challenging to protect against these attacks. We need to find solutions to provide a holistic protection against a wide range of cyber attacks on a variety of target systems. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, and mathematical programming have flexible and adaptable behavior, and can help overcome these challenges by providing a holistic protection against cyber attacks. Cyber intelligence is the collection of data and information related to the security of an organization, business, or state, to process this information, to develop and implement strategies to protect their operation, assets, and interests. Some examples of cybersecurity applications based on operation research are: planning problems. To select optimal portfolio of security safeguards, to minimize cybersecurity investment and expected cost of losses from security breaches in a supply chain, and to select a subset of security controls, among many available ones, is a resource allocation problem that should consider conflicting objectives. The security should be improved, without hindering productivity, under a limited financial budget. Scheduling problems. Applying machine learning to make the process of malware detection more actionable, scalable, and effective than traditional approaches, which require human intervention. Define a set of network security defense strategies, with the goal of reducing the probability of a successful large-scale attack, in a dynamically changing and complex network architecture, and to detect and correct cyber attacks in the measurement system. It implies, to examine the detection, classification, clustering, and analysis of anomalies in the network traffic. Real-time decisions. Network security defenses must evolve, responding to real-time attack incidents, modifying the underlying topology, or reallocating defense systems across the network. Game theory applications. To provide the best strategy for the defender, by reducing rogue packets that seek to flood the bandwidth of the network, in a distributed denial-of-service attack, DDoS, that occurs when the attackers flood the link, in such a way that legitimate users are denied access to a target resource on the network. The evolution of the game is based on a stochastic fictitious play process. Players do not have access to each other's payoff matrix. Each must observe the other's actions up to present, and plays the action generated based on the best response to these observations. However, when the game is played over a communication network, there are several practical issues that need to be considered. The players may make random decision errors from time to time. The players' observations of each other's previous actions may be incorrect, and the players will try to compensate for these errors based on the information they have. The use of advanced mathematical tools is not new to disaster management. There are many systems implemented to protect society. This is the facing a war is, perhaps, the closest thing to facing a pandemic. In general terms, a war is a latent danger, which can occur at any time, in which the surprise factor is part of the key to success. Start to preparing for war, the moment war begins, is heartbreaking, and presumably the premonition of a long-lasting disaster. Having a fixed pre-established combat plan is usually the consequence of not having analyzed the possible scenarios. Analyzing the possible scenarios requires mathematical models that can analyze complex situations. Technologically, that is possible due to modernity. Once in action, participants must have the ability to adapt quickly to each new situation, and at the same time action plans perhaps never thought of. For example, a bacteriophage virus could be the solution, not the cause, of the next pandemic. Throughout history, it is common to find a close collaboration between scientists and military, in order to choose the optimal decision in battle, and try to obtain victory. This is why some experts consider the beginning of operations research in the 3rd century BC, during the Second Punic War, with the analysis and solution that Archimedes proposed for the defense of the city of Syracuse, besieged by the Romans. Among Archimedes' inventions to solve the problem were the catapult, and a system of mirrors with which the city of Syracuse set fire to enemy ships, by focusing them with the sun's rays. Airlift Deployment Analysis System, ADANS, is a clear manifestation of the importance of operations research in modern warfare, as is the case of the Persian Gulf conflict in 1990, which was planned based on 2 operations: Desert Shield, before war operations, and Desert Storm, during war operations. There are multiple statements from U.S. Armed Forces officials, in which they claim that without the aid of operations research tools it would have been virtually impossible to coordinate coalition forces to achieve victory. It is a clear exercise of scientific disaster management. Persian Gulf Conflict. Conclusions. Operations research, or, in general highly complex applied mathematics, determined the effectiveness of the actions carried out during the Persian Gulf conflict in 1990. In the case of support for logistics readiness operations or carried out effectively the largest air mobilization in history. In the case of combat operations, or facilitated decision-making in the theater of war itself. At the strategic level, or supported the choice of the best courses of action that would facilitate the success of operations and the defeat of enemy forces. Given the magnitude of the forces mobilized, it is impossible to imagine how the actions would have been carried out, without the existence of tools derived from artificial intelligence. Those interested in learning more about this experience can watch the video. Artificial Intelligence in the Largest Logistic Operation in History, 1990 Persian Gulf Conflict. Localization of Security Services. Case: the City of Medellin. The case corresponds to the model of location of equipment to provide Homeland Security Services, in the city of Medellin, in 2004. For those interested in learning more about this case, you are invited to read the Section 7.4 Optimization of Master Plans for Territorial Security Equipment, of the book published by Hypothalamus Artificial Intelligence. Smart Cities and Regions, Integrated Mathematical Modeling of Economics, Public Management, and Logistics. Book in Spanish, in the process of being translated. Security is a fundamental right of human beings, which is why it has the character of a public good, and for this reason access to it cannot be subject to the rules determined by a market. It then becomes the minimum requirement for a dignified exercise of the right to life. Considering the above, the state must promote a comprehensive policy that guarantees the construction and consolidation of a supply network of Homeland Security services, which must be developed under technical economic criteria that guarantee efficiency and efficient logistical costs. Therefore, the Homeland Security Services system aims to provide the city region and its area of influence with the necessary and adequate infrastructure for the development of control activities against different types of criminals. Security services for the purposes of this model are provided through the following types of facilities: police station, EPO, and immediate attention center, CAI. The modeling of security services is carried out integrated into a single model, considering each type of security service as a level of service. The master plan is developed in 3 phases: basic data gathering, strategic reference plan, and short/medium-term tactical plan. The features of the security system are: demand annual crimes in Medellin in 2004. Supply: 1 police station per commune is required. A CAI can deal with 1 crime per day, a police station can deal with up to 5 crimes per day, and implicitly, it is assumed that each facility has the appropriate resources to do so. Costs: it is assumed that police stations or CAIs have the same characteristics, in terms of quality, cost, and capacity. The image shows the demand that must be met by the security services. The image shows the offer of facilities that provide security services. The table shows the facilities built. To determine the possibilities of coverage between supply nodes, a motorcycle speed of 18.75 km/h is assumed. From the above, coverage limits are generated, according to the type of security service. The elaboration of the reference strategic plan and the short-medium-term tactical plan involves the realization of 4 studies. In Phase 2, Strategic Reference Plan, the following studies are carried out. Minimal Cost Study, Cost Efficiency versus Time Access, and Cost, Standards and Regulations. In Phase 3, Short-Medium-Term Tactical Plan, the study is carried out, Short-Medium-Term Tactical Plan. The complete process involves a process of knowledge generation, to define strategic plan, which should serve as a guide to what needs to be achieved in the long term, and a tactical plan, which should indicate the part of the strategic plan that will be implemented in the short-medium term, as a development plan for the mayor's office. The goals of the development plan of the Medellin mayor's office are to build and adapt 2 police stations, and 16 CAIs over the next 4 years. Each study involves 1, or more runs, of the mathematical model, under different conditions. The table summarizes the studies carried out, and their characteristics. Minimal cost study. The objective of this study is the optimal location of all the Homeland Security services needed to meet the 100% cover of demand for coverage of existing crimes in 2004, taking as a reference the security services built. The following cases are required to perform the analysis. Ideal 04 produces the lowest cost solution, with no limits on access time, and Ideal 04 to 5%. It aims to adjust the location to organize the demand according to the access time. To this end, the minimum cost obtained in the Ideal 04 case is included as a constraint, plus a tolerance of 5% for re-optimization possibilities, around the minimum cost solution. The result of the adjustment involves construction of an additional CAI, and reduced average access time from 4.88 to 3.99 minutes. The results of the Ideal 04 to 5% case are considered as the ideal solution of minimum cost. It is ideal because although it is feasible, and of minimal cost, it does not comply with all the regulations that the Mayor's Office of Medellin has stipulated. The result of the minimum access time model, adjusted to cost and total demand coverage, indicates that security services should be built on the nodes indicated in the table. The image shows the demand coverage of the police stations. The colored polygons indicate the area covered by the station. Study efficiency, cost versus time access. The objective is to determine the Pareto curve of investment costs versus access time, which provides information on the relationship between the quality of the service, based on access time, and the cost required to provide such quality, under conditions of optimal decision-making. The information supports the determination of the area of the curve in which the authorities wish to operate, dividing the costs between the direct social cost, the cost of access, contributed by society, and the investment cost assumed by the government on behalf of society, which contributes taxes for construction. To obtain the Pareto curve, the runs indicated in the table were performed. The gap column is associated with the error allowed in the run of the mathematical model. Study efficiency, cost versus coverage limit. The objective is to determine the Pareto curve of efficiency investment costs versus coverage limit, which provides information on the relationship between the quality of the service, based on the coverage area, and the cost required to provide such quality. Study cost of the standards and regulations. Optimal location to meet the demand of the population existing in 2004, in accordance with the proposed regulations. It should be noted, the large amount of investment that would be required to comply with the regulation, obviously the service time tends to zero. Based on the strategic reference plan, run Ideal 04 to 5%, the decisions that can be implemented in the short-medium term are determined. The environmental constraints considered for this study are socio-economic related to the economic stratum, the CISPAN system, and the standard of living, considering the Human Development Index, HDI. The tactical plan will be developed including the number of facilities to be built, and aiming at maximizing the weighted coverage measure, that considers the stratum, the CISPAN, HDI. The prioritization of investment is made in accordance with the goal established in the development plan, construction of 16 CAI centers and 2 police stations. The table presents the facilities that define the tactical plan. The maps summarize the optimal tactical plan. Scheduling police patrols in San Francisco, California 1989. What does the system do? Schedule the deployment of police patrols in San Francisco. How? Forecasts hourly needs and schedule officers to maximize coverage. Benefit. It allows for a 25% increase in patrol availability when needed, which is equivalent to adding 200 officers and saving $11 million per year. Response times decreased by 20%, and traffic ticket revenue increased by $3 million per year. Homeland Security. Case, defending critical infrastructure. This section is based on the paper Defending Critical Infrastructure. In 2002, the USA Department of Homeland Security deems 13 infrastructure sectors that must be protected: agriculture, banking and finance, chemical industry, defense industrial base, emergency services, energy, food, government, information and telecommunications, postal and shipping, public health, transportation, and water. Critical infrastructure protection. Development of tools to anticipate, identify, and measure the risks to which a nation or region's critical infrastructure is exposed. This is to reduce the risks and consequences of an attack. B-level and tri-level optimization models to make critical infrastructure more resilient against terrorist attacks are used. Each model features an intelligent attacker, terrorists, and a defender, us, information transparency, and sequential actions by attacker and defender. 3 real examples are presented. The U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the U.S. Border Patrol at Yuma, Arizona, and an electrical transmission system. Each exercise gathers open-source data on a real-world infrastructure system, develops an appropriate B-level or tri-level model, and uses these to identify vulnerabilities in the system, or to plan an optimal defense. Attacker and defender models. The core of an attacker-defender model is an optimization model of an infrastructure system whose objective represents the system's value or cost to the defender, our society, while it operates. For instance, the maximum throughput of a pipeline network could measure that system's value, while power generation costs, plus economic losses resulting from unmet demand, could measure the cost of operating an electric power grid. Attacker-defender model. It is assumed that the defender operates a system to minimize cost, which is represented by an objective function. The defender is a misnomer in these models, because the models do not directly represent defensive actions. Call it system operator would be more accurate, but awkward. The model posits that an attacker wishes to maximize the worst damage he can cause, by restricting the defender's operational activities. The attacker determines an attack plan, AP, in which he specifies which assets of the defender he will attack. Attacking an asset prevents the defender from carrying out activities that depend directly on that asset. To determine the set of activities included in the AP, the attacker solves the optimization problem, AD, that is a type of B-level program. A B-level program is a type of Stackelberg game. Here, the terms leader and follower in a Stackelberg game represent our attacker and defender, respectively. Defender-attacker-defender model. The solution of an AD model identifies the most critical set of assets for a system. To approximate the solution to the optimal defense problem, for example, to identify a near-optimal defense plan, given a limited defense budget, it is possible to solve a defender-attacker DA model considering the solution to the AD model. But how do we identify the truly optimal solutions? In theory, we simply embed the 2-level AD model into a 3-level defender-attacker-defender DAD model, which corresponds to a bi-level problem with a lower, internal, level that corresponds to the AD model with a restricted set of attack strategies. Therefore, the defender wants to identify an optimal defense plan so that when the attacker resolves AD, the benefit that the attacker perceives, i.e., the worst damage that the attacker can inflict, is minimized. Border Patrol, Defender-Attacker Model. In particular, the model wants to improve the likelihood that border defenses will detect a foreigner, who may be a terrorist, trying to infiltrate the country. For simplicity's sake, it is assumed that a single infiltrator will choose from a set of known routes, to attempt to enter the U.S. illegally. The figure shows a map of the Yuma border area, along with a skeleton of the infiltration network, that describes the routes an infiltrator might take from Mexico, into the U.S., through conventional portals, or through road, or trail raids. The intent is to spend a limited security budget on procedural changes, sensors, highway patrols, and helicopter patrols, to increase the odds of detection at individual arcs and thus maximize the likelihood of overall detection. Options for procedural changes include closure of certain legal portals, and use of sensors, or helicopter patrols, for the detection and signaling of ground units. Ground units are vehicles and crews that follow signals from helicopter patrols. It was to study 4 scenarios. The results are specified in terms of probability of detection. Baseline, No security improvements. An infiltrator would cross the border and traverse downtown Yuma, exiting the city to the northeast. Probability of detection equals 0.04. 1 checkpoint, 1 remote observation post, 2 road patrols, sensors to cover at most 15 road segments, and 1 helicopter, all visible to the infiltrator. Probability of detection equals 0.07. 2 checkpoints, 1 remote observation post, 2 road patrols, sensors to cover at most 15 road segments, and 1 helicopter, all visible to the infiltrator. Probability of detection equals 0.11. Surprise interdiction of downtown Yuma infiltration route. 1 hidden sensor field, and 2 surprise roadblocks are located optimally. The probability of detection rises to 0.60 because information has been hidden from the infiltrator. This represents an interesting use of a Stackelberg game in which we fool the follower, infiltrator or attacker, into playing one game but evaluate success according to another that is more advantageous to the defender. This game will be played many times, however, the infiltrator will eventually catch on to the ruse. Two-person zero-sum game theory may be needed here. Electric power grids, defender-attacker-defender model. It was developed a decision support system called the Vulnerability of Electric Grids Analyzer, VEGA, that uses an AD model to identify critical components in a power grid. Criticality of grid components is measured through disruption, which may be viewed as the penalty for unserved demand, weighted by different customer sectors. The models assumes that a group of terrorists, using limited offensive resources, will attack and destroy grid components to maximize disruption. In VEGA, a standard optimal DC power flow model is used to simulate the electrical grid. This LP approximates the true, nonlinear AC model, but the industry deems it adequate for security analyses. In fact, an independent system operator may solve a model like this thousands of times per day to ensure that a power grid maintains N-1 security standard, that can still meet all customer demand after any single component failure. In this case, the sub-models represent different system states as demand varies and repairs proceed, over time, after an attack. The results presented in the article show that an intuitive defender plan yields a cost almost 28% higher than optimal. This percentage would likely be even higher in the real world. Presumably, a planner who suboptimally forces defense will not optimally allocate his remaining defensive resources, either. Anticipation. It is the core of decision-making under Environment 4.0. It is not a question of reconstructing the damage caused by a disaster, with decisions a posteriori. It is about anticipating and mitigating with actions before the disaster. And the best way to do that is to use the mathematical modeling power under the new technological paradigm. Like Carl Friedrich Gauss, hypothalamus artificial intelligence believes that mathematics is the queen of the sciences. Thank you for your attention.